Hi, welcome to the Caffeinated Librarian. I'm Amy,
I'm Simona.
and today we'll be talking about, oh my God, what's the name of the show?
Sweet Home.
Sweet Home. I can never remember the show. Now I'm just calling it Crew Crew.
So Sweet Home is a 2020 Netflix Korean horror series. It is based on a webtoon of the same name created by Kim Kan-bi and Hwang Young-chan. And it's a really fantastic series. So just going over the basic plot of the story, at some point in time, the world is overrun by this epidemic where people succumb to very strong desires and they become monsters based on whatever desire they have. So, for example, one of the first inhabitants of, so basically, it takes place in this apartment complex, which is sort of overrun with vines. It's in really poor condition. I believe it's supposed to be demolished at some point. And there are a few inhabitants of the building that we get to know pretty well. They're the core group of characters. And one day, the world just sort of goes to hell, lack of a better term. And there's this epidemic, basically overcoming most people, where they succumb to really strong desires. They become monsters. So, for example, one of the first inhabitants we see is this woman who's an aspiring model, and she's starving herself in order to maintain a certain image. And one of the things that she constantly says is, I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry, I wish I could eat. And her monster sort of aspect manifests in this insatiable hunger for practically everything. Like, she eats her cat, she eats ramen noodles, she starts to go after the other inhabitants. And the thing that causes a lot of fear is that no one knows when it will hit. No one knows who will succumb to it. There's a lot of mystery surrounding why this epidemic has started, who was sort of patient zero, so to speak. The military isn't really forthcoming with information because I kind of believe they really don't know either. And things really take a turn for the worse when the president of Korea is on live television. And that's when the military officially takes over. They distribute pamphlets telling people these are the warning signs. If you have anything, you have to quarantine. Let the government know if you spot anyone that's exhibiting these symptoms because they're dangerous. And what this does is it just serves to spread more fear and paranoia, especially considering that the inhabitants are stuck in the building. They can't go anywhere.
Right.
There are monsters outside. There are some monsters within the building. So you get this feeling of claustrophobia as well, because like you said, you don't know who's going to transform. And if they do transform, are they going to harm you or will they leave you alone? So this is another fear and anxiety that runs throughout the show. Yeah, so that's a very brief rundown of what the central plot is, so to speak. And we do focus on these really fantastic characters. Did you have a favorite character, Amy, or a favorite moment?
Man, I think Grandpa is my favorite. Everybody has a nickname. I cannot remember anyone's name. So like literally I've just nicknamed everyone. And so
I
he
did
was
the same
Grandpa.
thing.
So because he's a grandpa,
So,
maybe people would guess, but I loved him.
mhm.
And I think I'm trying to think of a favorite scene, and it's hard to call a really hard scene like my favorite, but I think that my favorite was when like the orphans and the mom who lost her daughter are all grieving together. That made me cry. So that there's the Amy cried part of the show.
No, well, one of my favorite characters is So Yi Kyung, who's the firefighter character, resident badass female, if I can use that term. She has links to the government. You eventually learn that she was in a highly specialized task force of the government. So she has those connections, and she is also a firefighter. She is actually the only character, I believe, that's not in the webtoon. She was added for the drama, but I'm certainly glad that they did add her. One thing that I loved about this drama were the female characters. Often
Yeah.
they take center stage, and I loved how they start off, many of them start off with this antagonistic relationship. Like I'm thinking of Jisoo.
Right.
I nicknamed her Batgirl because she's the one that wields the bat as a weapon.
She's Guitar Girl.
Yeah, Batgirl, Guitar Girl, she's awesome. And Unyu, who's the resident wisecrack girl, she's
Dancer.
Yes, she's the ballet dancer. They start off with a very antagonistic relationship, and then they grow closer as the show continues. So these wonderful bonds begin to form between many of the female characters, and they work together. One of my favorite moments is when Do Sick, who is the disabled character, called him Hephaestus because he makes one's weapons. He's like this awesome, like he can turn anything into a weapon. So he's an awesome character. When he's being attacked by the spider monster, all the guys have practically like frozen. I'm not sure. Did you ever see that scene?
Oh yeah, no, I just missed, like, I think I was in the middle of the 7th episode. Like
all right.
I was like cramming for this like it was an exam. Like I was doing work and watching it in like the top corner, and it was an interesting, and like working on like a class and listening to people screaming and dying. It's a very interesting to task.
Yeah, so that was my favorite moment. He's being attacked by the spider. The men have basically frozen. They don't know what to do. And Anyo's character saying, this is what we prepped for, like grow hair and move forward. And she and all the women are the ones that lift up the spider and help Dusik get away from it.
Right.
That was a wonderful scene. I was like, yes, it's women coming together, working together and achieving a goal and then moving forward. And then the young girl is the one that firebombs the spider monster, which was really cool. Her name is So Young. She's one of the siblings, and she just fire bombs, and she's like, get out of here. And she just throws like the cocktail thing that they've made. A lot of great moments. One of the aspects about this, though, that confused me because it's never really answered is the nature of the virus, or it's called a curse sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you have desire, so I'm assuming that the desire has to be so overwhelming, and that's what makes you transform, because everyone has desires. Like a lot of the characters are panicking, like they want to rush out.
Right.
So does your desire have to be like all consuming, and that's what makes it manifest into a monster? Like that's the part that was very confusing for me.
Yeah, I was thinking it was more about like it was strong desires that were kind of like given to them in like a monkey's paw sort of circumstance, like the grocery store owner who like doesn't want anybody to know he's bald, but his toupee keeps flopping off.
Yes.
Like winds up covered in hair. And then there's this muscle man that comes into the building. It's just saying protein.
Yes.
Like so they got what they wanted, but it's so distorted. But I also felt like I there were people's phobias. Like I feel like spider guy, tongue guy, eyeball guy. Everything had a name. It's amazing.
Well, the tongue monster is called the tongue monster. So you're correct. That's the monster's name, tongue monster.
But I think I mean, like, what would eyeball guy maybe he couldn't see or something, but and all of the really terrifying ones were men. And I don't know why. that was. Like, is it just because they had to be naked so that they just wound up like getting rid of any secondary sex characteristics?
Hmm. That's it. That, honestly, I did not even think about that. I remember and I forgot what episode this is in, when the characters, because at one point one of the characters, Jisoo, her appendix bursts.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a rush basically to get outside to get medical supplies, which this is also a running theme where in the event of epidemic, so supplies start to dwindle, and there's a rush for them to sort of get out of the building, and they're in the parking lot, which has also been overrun by these monsters.
Mm-hmm.
I know at one point when they're driving in the vehicle, there is a monster that I believe is supposed to be a woman, because you see her breast and it looks like she has needles stuck in them. It was weird. It's it's a very weird scene where all these monsters are basically jumping on the vehicle trying to get at them. So I think
I couldn't see anything. I
yeah.
sound like my mother, and I'm gonna make my mom complaint. It was too dark. I
Oh,
couldn't see anything. I didn't know who anyone was because it was dark and they were all covered with dirt and blood.
that's
But
fair. Yeah, there are a lot of dark moments where I was like, what is going on?
right, so
Um,
like I had the brightness turned up to a million. But I did want to talk just briefly about Guitar Girl's appendicitis.
yes.
I loved that they were setting up for the surgery and everybody was wearing masks and half of them had them down over off their noses. And it's
Oh
like,
yeah.
wow, in a pandemic, there's a lot of people are like goes over your nose. Um,
Yeah, yeah. But I like
um
how they at least tried to sterilize surfaces, like when they
yeah,
pour boiling water over the table and like
but yeah, I mean, so there were some problems that I had with that. And what was I going to? Oh yeah, so um are are they actually trying to kill people? Like, what is the goal? Like, they're chasing people, but like sometimes they just kill them and leave them. Sometimes they bite them. Sometimes, like there's, I guess it just happens to go with their forms that they've taken on, but that frustrates me.
I guess. I mean, it could be, for example, the guy who I call him the Gazelle Man because he has the one who is super fast and
Hmm.
caught, maybe I'm assuming he was a runner and he had a strong desire to run because that's essentially what his character, he zips all over the place.
Hmm.
Um, I think it like it varies because I was thinking about at one point you see this green, I called it the green blob monster. And that's the monster that saves the life of Young-soo, the very young boy. The monster hides him from one of the gang members that's basically prowling the place looking for people. And that monster, I mean, I was curious, well, what strong desire did this monster have
Hmm.
manifested that it became a blob? Um, so, I mean, I was trying to look at characteristics, like maybe Protein
Hmm.
was someone obsessed with weightlifting and
Yeah, I figured he was a.
yeah, I mean, the guy with the extended mouth and tongue, he was wearing a hospital uniform.
Oh, I didn't even see that. I didn't notice
Yeah,
that.
was he a patient of some kind? I think he may have been one of the residents, the woman who owns the Pomeranian, Yayin, the one who knows everyone. She mentions how, didn't he go to the hospital? So, I mean, what
Mm.
when they're for, so like I was trying to figure that out too, like because the forms I'm assuming are clues,
Right,
but
right,
they could also be purely random. Like eyeball guy, maybe he was a peeping Tom and
right. We just need a big eyeball. We need a
yeah.
big eyeball on the set.
Yeah,
Uh,
and maybe another aspect of the uncertainty is basically putting yourself in the situation of the people currently, like where no one knows anything,
right.
and like even the military or the government doesn't offer much information. And at a certain point, I completely, well, from the very beginning, I never trusted the government.
Never
Um,
trust the government in a an apocalypse.
Yeah, because the minute they take over, they essentially become dictatorial, and they're basically saying, we're going to round you up whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Are they taking them?
Right.
So there's that aspect as well. And they're distributing all these pamphlets, which in my opinion causes more paranoia, because
Right.
they're saying if you exhibit these signs,
Right. Or kill yourself, or
yeah,
somebody else can kill you.
yeah.
And I, on a note about that, about the infected,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like, there was never any real like figuring out of like how people got this,
Mm-hmm.
right? We
No.
never knew.
Yeah.
So that bugged me a lot. And it, I just want to say, can we just talk about how that lady with that lost her baby
Yes.
with the kids, like,
Yeah.
why would you like, I get that you never know who's infected, but if you know they're infected, maybe don't be like, you watch the door while we all sleep. Like, it's problematic.
Yeah, I think it goes to one of the themes that I highlighted was the whole humans versus monsters, us versus them. And
Mhm.
that's throughout the entire show, because Hyunsu, when they discover that he's infected,
Right.
there's a group that wants him literally thrown out of the building because who cares?
Mhm.
Group that are
Right.
saying, he's been able to fight it because he is one of the few characters that is able to fight off I called it monsterization. That's probably not.
Well, they called it that too.
Oh, okay, great.
At which point I snorted, because I cannot take monsterization seriously. That word, it just broke it every time. Like, who
Yes.
could resist monsterization?
Yeah.
um,
So
but
he's one of
anyway,
the ones that does.
right.
And he's almost like, what does he remind me of? I can't even think of it, but he so he's able to resist it, although there's a constant battle because his
Hmm.
character suffers from depression, he's suicidal, and you learn why he's depressed and suicidal.
Right.
So his inner thoughts are trying to make it so that he completely succumbs to his desires. I don't know exactly what his desires are. I was very confused. I don't know if that's even answered. So he's able to avoid it.
Hmm.
Woman who lost her daughter, Im Young, she's able up to a certain point to avoid monsters
Right. Right.
as well. And her monster, in manifest, she becomes a gigantic fetus,
I know.
which kind of made sense to me because she had a desire for her daughters. So
Hmm.
turning into a, I guess, kind of made sense to me.
Well, it was her longing, like,
Yeah.
and just like this, she couldn't, and the guilt, she couldn't let herself forget. So like,
Yeah.
she had like a physical manifestation at all times. She had her daughter's stroller that
Yeah.
she would just wheel around and talk to,
Yeah.
because like, she needed a palpable stone to carry around, like an albatross around her neck.
Mm-hmm.
um but I did really like the handling of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, it's so tragic. And like, I really wrote down a lot about, where is it, about like the psychopathy of like a lot of people, like the bully that was after the kid, Cha Hyun Soo, right?
Mm-hmm.
um but like, the guy was not okay. Like, he was like, the sky was blue, the sky was so blue, and that's why I want you to die. And like, he was encouraging him to jump off a roof. He was encouraging another kid to walk in front of cars. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that is a level of bullying that is not, the general bullying. He really, he was violent and he was cruel. And
In
then
Korea, it sort of is. There was, and also the issue is that teens, up until a certain point, according to Korean law, and I'm just going to do this.
no, I'd like to know.
You cannot be prosecuted or receive jail time. So that's a big issue, because the whole point is that they want you to be able to learn. Instead of punishing you, you learn so your life isn't ruined.
Mm-hmm.
There are teens that have gone around maiming people, beating people up, because they cannot receive jail time or any consequences. This was actually recorded. These three girls split, I think, the scalp of another girl, almost scalped her, smashed her with bottles. They recorded this. They texted each other saying, "Oh, haha, I think I went too far." They received no punishment for it. So the level of bullying is extremely severe, which is why this affected me so much, because people talk about it. And especially with, you're considered a minor until I think you reach the age of 19 or 20. So whatever crimes you commit, you cannot be prosecuted for them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you do like a community service at most. So it's not like over here where if you're injuring or if you kill someone, juvenile detention center, not there, because they basically they say, we don't want to ruin your life at such a young age. We want you to learn and grow. So
something's not working then.
Yeah. And I think there are people that want to revisit the law, but it's slow in coming. So that level of bullying, it exists. Like, with that particular character, the first time I watched it, I couldn't figure out why he had targeted Hyun-soo. I was like, okay, I don't get it. I watched it a second time and I realized, well, he suffers from severe affluenza because his father is very rich, and his father ends up firing Hyun-soo's father, which causes Hyun-soo to spiral, and that's when he tries to kill himself. So yeah, so that level of bullying exists. It's a problem. So him saying, "Well, in front of that car, and I'll pay you money to your mom," it's so believable. Yeah, I was kind of hoping we would learn more about what happens to that bully character, but maybe hopefully in the next season. But yeah, so Hyun-soo, in fact, when he does monsterize, which that sounds so terrible, it manifests in these blades that emerge from his skin, and he gets like a wing made of blades. Very cool visually speaking. I couldn't understand how that is his design. I have no clue what that means.
Because he's suicidal,
I guess.
I mean, I think it like, and he took like a box cutter to himself.
Yeah.
So I think that's his, and I do think it's not just like their deepest desires. I do think it's like things, like people that are obsessed with things that are terrible for them. Like clearly this dude is like in a constant state of suicidal ideation. So, I do get that. But it's maybe it's not what they most desire, but it's thoughts, like it's troubling thoughts that are pervasive.
That makes more sense. I can see that. That makes more sense to me than a desire. That definitely, I can see that. That makes a lot more sense. I was even thinking of, I called him the I can't see monster, the one that kind of looked like a gremlin.
Yeah, I can't see.
Yeah, I felt so bad for him. I think he's one of the few monsters that broke my heart, because like when you first see him, he's basically complaining about a boss who's bullying him. And then he turns into a monster. And I'm assuming he's constantly looking for that boss. But I was like, with I called the guy Samurai Guy, Jae-hyun, the Christian guy that wields the
I called him Sword
Samurai.
Guy.
Yeah, I called him Samurai Guy. I was hoping that he and Batgirl would be the end game, but that was not meant to be. I will forgive them for killing him off. But like,
oh man, he died.
I sorry.
No, he was totally a red shirt. He was totally, like, you could see when he was like drinking, and he kind of, I think he'd kind of given up. And he's fascinating.
I love his
fascinating because he believes so deeply in God. And and you always, like, there's an expression like, there aren't any atheists in a foxhole.
Yes.
And like, and I feel like it might, it's the other way around. Like they're like, well, that God ship may have sailed except for him.
Yes.
They're all like, you know, feeling like wasting, they're wasting their breath. And in the world that is turned into this, it's not hard to see why.
No, and there's an awesome line when Jisoo, this is after Jaehyun, who's Katana man, he lures Protein Monster who crashes through the window.
Right.
And Jisoo says, I know you love God, but could you not go to see him right now? Can you wait to join him later? Like,
Yeah.
I just love that moment between the two of them, because you say, like, just stop, like, stop trying to die, like,
Right.
I need you around.
Right. But again, that I get that as like, if I put myself continuously in very risky situations,
Yeah.
nobly, and I die, I did my best, like,
Yeah.
and he's like clearly got some troubles. I couldn't figure out the brother and sister, dancer and the glasses guy.
Oh, okay.
Help. Like did you understand that? Like I could not. I know there was a scene with dancer girl, a memory, and also that's another one of my mother's. Like I don't know when's the past and when's the future.
Yeah, it kind of, the show sort of shifts back and forth, and also there are moments when, especially with Hyun-Soo's character, where he just dissociates, but he goes within himself and his inner demons come out and he talks. I think with Unyuk and Unyu, so Dancer Girl and Unyuk, who basically assumes the leadership role within the complex. He's the one that basically says, we got to board up, we got to stock up on supplies. Right. He's very methodical. He doesn't really react to things in an emotional way per se. I first I thought they were actual siblings. I think Anya was adopted. I had a hard time.
She says, you're not my real brother.
Yeah, I had a hard time understanding their dynamics. I know that Anu was a dancer. She had aspirations to dance and it stopped due to an injury. And Unyuk is going to medical school, right, and he had a brilliant future. And I think because of what may have happened to her, he was unable to continue. So I think with her, it's a lot of guilt manifest, where she basically does everything within her power to not listen to anything that he says, to constantly be at his throat or whatever. I don't know if that's what you were asking, or
just I didn't get like their dynamic. I didn't get why they were there. I didn't get where their parents were. There were so many questions.
Okay.
And I did want to talk about the disease again.
Okay.
Whatever we're gonna call this.
Okay.
Because is it a little bit ableist to be like, well, only the really strong ones can get through this? Like, is that just another one of, these times when, like, if you beat it, it's because you're strong? Or am I oversensitive, which is totally possible?
Well, okay. Maybe I'll answer it with an example, and that's like, and I'll try to be very brief. I don't want to be, because I'm thinking of the ones that are able to resist. Because I think if we're assuming the disease, like let's say it's either desire mixed with, I'm sorry, what did you said emotion, like desire, emotion, maybe mental state. Maybe like those three things are the contributing factors, and depending on how vulnerable you are in either one of these aspects, that might result in you being able to really resist it, or you succumbing to it completely.
Right.
So, like, if you look at the character of the convenience store owner,
Oh man.
he's very vile. He's extremely abusive.
Yeah.
He puts on this front of strength, but he's really cowardly. He's more like, if I know that I can manipulate you, I'm going to use that to my advantage. And it manifests in him being very abusive verbally and physically towards his wife. So he eventually succumbs to his monsterization. He becomes a gigantic hairball. So he's one of the one, I'm going to think of the ones that actually fully succumb to it. So he's one. Im Young, who's the mother who lost her daughter, she comes to it eventually. That's two. Hyunsu to an extent also succumbs to his, because he has his ultimate transformation. Very emotionally and mentally vulnerable. So I'm trying to think of anyone who's, and even Dusik, who he becomes like, he ends up being able to walk as a result of his monsterization. Like, you know, and I don't know if you saw this scene or not, I hate to spoil it.
No worries.
He eventually he walks, and he's the one that stops Hyunsu from causing more damage. Like, Hyunsu battles with Monster Boy 2, the one who's part of the gang. They have this fight, and Hyunsu sort of loses control, and Dusik, you know, comes up, hugs him. He says, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You're okay." And he ends up dying.
Well, that's I like that, because that's kind of a full, it's nice that he's telling someone else the things that he needs to hear.
Exactly.
Because he lost his child and he couldn't reach him.
Yeah. Well, maybe the better answer to your question was, what was an example where you saw it as maybe being ableist? Maybe that's a better question, because I don't think I answered your question at all, and I'm sorry.
No, I mean, it's just that, like, you have to be able to fight this thing in your head. Like, and it's just it's like not a, like, it just, I guess that it would be like it's just that it's not the physically strongest, it's the emotionally strongest. And I mean, it's an interesting it's interesting because I know about what's it called, like, people that are more able to get through trauma than others, and still, you know, like, it, I can't remember, there's a word, but I can't remember it, but you know, that they're able to deal with these traumas, these repeated traumas, and still keep going, versus people that are succumbing. And you know, I don't know if it's an exploration of that, or more just like, the more injured you are, the less able you are to resist.
I would want to believe that it's more of the former, what you formally, where it's not a commentary on who's weak or who's strong. I think also, when you consider, when you're someone who suffers, and obviously I've never suffered from trauma, so I'm not speaking from a perspective like I know what I'm saying, but I would assume that if you're someone who has experienced trauma repeatedly, and now you're thrown into a situation where the world has complete hell, there is no stability whatsoever. I would assume that would kind of aggravate the issues, especially in a situation where it's all these people confined in a building. You can't leave the building, because if you leave, you could be killed, or you're rounded up by the military. You know, you basically don't really have running water, supplies be rationed. So I would assume that all of these situations, even if you're really trying to be strong, would eventually just wear you out completely.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I would want to believe it wasn't a deliberate choice for the showrunners to say, you see, if you are mentally, quote unquote, weak, you will not be able to survive this. Like, you are just doomed to die. You know, that's not the message they're sending. Because even at moments when a lot of these characters are at their lowest, they do rise back up. like ballet girl, like
Mm-hmm.
moments when she succumbs to her anger, her guilt. And then there are moments where she's like says, like, okay, I'm snapping out of this, or like I need to do what I have to do.
Right.
Even the wife of the grocery store owner, look at her. I mean, she could honestly say, I've been so beaten down,
Right.
but she still manages to do things. She still manages in her own little way to subvert
Right.
expectations and do and accomplishes good things.
Right.
So I guess it really depends, because there's people like, for example, Model Dude, the one who ends up alerting the military by pressing.
Model dude.
He is the one who he's constantly worried about his skin. Like, he's also the one that disobeys the shower limitation rule and showers in the dirty water.
Ugh, that was disgusting, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, so he's the one that eventually alerts the military, because of course the firefighter character receives a magic button from the military
Right.
saying, whenever you're ready to let us know, press it. And instead of getting rid of it, they put it in a drawer where someone can find it. He presses the button and that alerts the military to their location, which is why they end up round up in the first place. Yeah, he was an example of someone who does not experience any symptoms of monsterization, never, and he is extremely weak-willed.
Right.
He is self-serving, and he's like, I don't care. Like, especially when you're considering giving Hyunsu, who up until this point has been helping you. Like, I hate when they make him run their errands.
I know.
That scene so much. So basically, Hyunsu has been helping you. He's proven that in spite of my affliction, I can do good. I'm helping you.
Right.
And he says, I don't care. And what do you think they're going to do to Hyunsu once they get a hold of him? They're going to experiment on him.
Right.
That you're willing and okay to press a button just bothered me so much. So I think he's a good example of someone who doesn't experience, and he has no spine, so to speak.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I think let's do our final thoughts. You want to go first?
Sure. My final thoughts is that it's a really good show. It deals with a lot of complex themes, wonderful characters, flawed and unflawed. They're just fantastic, and I would highly recommend it.
Yeah. Same thing. Sit close, get your bifocals or trifocals, and brighten like the heck out of the TV so that maybe everybody's just a negative image. And good luck with that. But I agree with the characters. I definitely think it's a really good psychological investigation of what personalities, what happens to certain people in certain situations.
Definitely, it's a good examination of what it means to be human. So yeah, so thank you once again for joining us. We look forward to doing the next podcast. We hope you enjoy it just as much as the previous ones, and everyone stay safe, stay well, and have a great weekend.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.